Hello everyone, welcome to the JMeter tutorial session 2. Before starting over, we'll look into things what we have actually done in the last session. So we learned about what is JMeter and how JMeter works. Then we saw how to download Java, the prerequisite for JMeter. Then we moved ahead with the JMeter configuration and an overview of JMeter application. And we also saw what are the different types of JMeter launching. So in today's session, we will look into the first two components of JMeter, that is test plan and thread group. Yeah. So first of all, we will learn about JMeter components. So when we say JMeter component, basically we have test plan, which has the highest level, and then we have thread groups. Then we have samplers, listeners. Samplers are nothing but the actual request which you will be actually preparing to hit the server. Then listeners, which will show you the report, and we'll have workbench. Actually, workbench is obsolete right now. It is not part of post JMeter 4 version. After that, we'll see assertions, then config elements. Then we have logic controllers, and last but not the least are timers. So in this tutorial, we will see on first three, that is test plan, thread group, and samplers. So moving on, this is actually the JMeter component flow diagram. So basically, this is actually you should design your test script, that is on the topmost level, it is test plan. Then under test plan, there will be thread group. Thread group are nothing but the actual, it's like V users, as you can say, that is virtual users which will actually simulate the actual behavior of your end user. Then inside thread group, there will be logical controllers such as if controller, module controller, loop controller. You might not be using all of those in your script, but in your at one point of time you have to come across these different logical controllers. Apart from this, there will be config element. These are the actual mainly config elements are used for parameterization setup, and for that we usually use CSV data set config, where you have to actually give the path of CSV file which will take your parameters. Apart from this, in config elements we have HTTP request default, user default variables, HTTP cache manager. We will look into all those things in detail in latter part of the tutorial. So after that we have listeners. So listeners, as I said in the previous slide, that listeners are the uh, reports, or it will show you in the graphical format whatever the request and response time. So it totally depends upon your requirement. What is your requirement? Depending upon that, you will use listeners. So it basically, listeners are different types like graph. Then we have tabular format. Then we have tree format, and then summary report. After that, we in thread group, which is the most important thing, that is the samplers. So basically, samplers are various kinds of which JMeter supports. On a very high level, you can say that samplers are nothing but the protocols. So widely used samplers are HTTP request, that are the basic uh, protocol which actually web application uses. After that we have FTP request, that is the file transport protocol. Apart from this, we have TCP request, and we have SOAP request. Apart from this, we have REST request. Different kind of samplers we can use. at a different point of time depending upon our requirement. So moving ahead, so first is test plan. So as you can see on my screen, this is actually how a test plan look. So what is a test plan? The test plan is where the overall setting of a test case are specified. That is the highest level of your test script where each and every component will reside. So test plan is the top level element of the JMeter, and it actually explains the sequence of steps execute at the runtime. So you should be very careful while actually designing your script, because the way you design your script in the test plan, the same sequence it will run at the time of actual load test. So in test plan actually basically made up of thread groups, as I said in the previous slide. There will be thread group samplers, then controllers, listeners, assertions, and configuration elements. So we will see all those components. First, we'll see on the right side. You can see the actual graphical user interface of a test plan, how it looks. So first component is the name. So you can give a meaningful name inside this. Here it is mentioned as test plan. Then we have comments. Comments are nothing but for just for your necessity, so that in that part of the time, if you are actually want to see, or if you want to check what is this test plan is consist of, you can actually write on the comment section. After that, we have the variables, user defined variables, and the scope of variable defined in this particular part will have a scope for the all the components inside a test plan. So you can directly just click on add, you can give the meaningful name and the value on the right side, and you can actually copy and paste also, that is from the add from clipboard section. So moving ahead, you can see that there are three checkboxes. One is run thread group consecutively, that is one at a time. So it means if your test plan consists of two thread groups, and if you want it to run parallelly or you want to do it consecutively, that is one at a time or either in the parallel. If you want to run it in parallel, then just keep it unchecked. If you want to run in consecutively, that if first first your first thread group will be executed, and after the completion of the first thread group, then only second thread group will start. So you need to check the first checkbox, that is run thread groups consecutively. Second is run tear down thread groups after shutdown of main threads. So this is something like as we can see in different performance tool, like in load runner we use init, then we have action, then we have end. So it means similar way in JMeter also there is one more thread group, that is tear down thread group. That thread group will consist all the components which you want to execute post your actual execution. So it means if you want that kind of setup, then you need to check this second checkbox. We will look into this example in the practical session also. The third checkbox is nothing but the functional test mode. So if you check this particular functional test mode and you execute the test, then in the listener, that is view result tree listener, you will have, and in the response.xml, one of the file will be generated, and it will consist all of your request and response pair. If you uncheck this, it will only consist of the few of the things like the label name, and then we have response time. So these kind of things only. And if you check this particular checkbox, it will contain all the data related to request and response as well. And in the last section, you can see that there is add directory or jar to class path. If you want to specify any particular jar which is related to your test, you can directly add it over here. So this is all high level overview of test plan and the GUI of test plan. So moving ahead, we have thread group. So what is a thread group? A thread group is a set of threads executing under the test plan. So it is the base element for every JMeter test plan. So each and every test plan should have at least one thread group. So another definition is thread group is a group of users which will be hitting the server. As I said, it will simulate the actual end users workflow, whatever you have recorded in your script. So basically there are three types of thread group. One is the normal thread group, that is known as thread group. Second is setup thread group, which will be basically used for pre-test scenario. It's like if you want to do any prerequisite kind of things like data creation or anything which should be done before the actual load test, then you should actually give all the workflow in the setup thread group, which is related to data creation. The third type is tear down thread group. That is the if you want to do any kind of action which should be actually executed post the test which you are executing, then you put all those actions into this tear down thread group. So in the previous slide, as you see in the second checkbox is run tear down thread group. Once this is checked only, then only you will be able to use tear down thread group. So this is all clear, right? So on the right side, you can see the thread group GUI. So it will be basically same for all different kind of thread group. You can consider same kind of components. So first thing is the name, as like we saw in the test plan also, it give it a meaningful name, so that in the later in future if you come back to the script and if you check what is this thread group is for, so give a meaningful name and related comments in the comment section also. So basically in thread group we have different kind of options like action to be taken after sampler. We have different radio buttons, so we will look into these things in the next slide. So this is the component of the thread group, that is the radio button continue is for to ignore error and move to the next element in the tree. Means if you check the first radio button, then it will ignore error and move to the next element of the tree. And second one is in start next thread group. So these are the different options which you can check once any error comes. So it depends upon these options which radio button you have selected. Depending upon that, it will actually do the action once the error comes. Okay, so moving ahead, we have number of threads user, that is the actual number of users which you want to actually test. The next is ramp up period, means like if you suppose you have given number of thread as 4 and ramp up period in seconds as 20 seconds. So it means for each 5 seconds there will be one user on the system. So it will take 20 seconds to load all the users on the system, whichever you have mentioned in the number of threads. So next is loop count. So loop count is the number of times the test you want to execute. It is something like iteration. So it depends upon the loop count how many iteration you want to run the test. If you want to run the test not on the iteration basis but on the time basis. If you want to execute a certain test for a particular duration, then I'll show you in the previous slide, there is loop count forever, right? So if you check forever, then it will not take the count from the loop count section. It's like from here, which is mentioned 1 year. So once you check forever checkbox, then you will have duration and startup delay enabled, as you can see in the scheduler configuration section. Okay, so moving ahead, scheduler is the, as I said, that if you select the checkbox forever, then only duration and startup delay will be enabled. So duration stands for the duration of the test which you want to do in seconds. If you put 3600, then it will run for 1 hour. And startup delay is something which actually hold of the execution. So suppose if you have given 5 seconds in a startup delay and you press start button, then it will wait until 5 seconds, then only the thread group will start execution. So startup delay is nothing but the amount of time which it will wait before the actual thread group execution starts. So these are the different options on the thread group. We will see all those options in the practical session also. So moving ahead on the samplers. So there are various kind of samplers available in the JMeter thread group. Samplers in JMeter is nothing but is used to send different kind of request to a server. So samplers are nothing but the actual request which JMeter will be sending to the application under test server. And samplers are the child of thread group. So each and every thread group should contain at least one sampler. So there the few of the widely used samplers are HTTP request, which is used to send HTTP or HTTPS request. Even it is used for REST API calls also. After that we have JDBC request, then we have SOAP or XML request, and FTP request, file transfer protocols request. So these are the different kind of samplers we will be actually seeing during our further going into the tutorial. And then we have listeners also. So what are listeners? Listeners are the test plan elements that are used to view and analyze the results in graphical or tabular format. So we have different kind of listeners like view result tree, summary report, aggregate report, backend listener, and then we have view results in table. So these all different kind of listeners will have different kind of application, and it will be used depending upon your necessity. So how to add listeners? Like, so just right click on test plan, then hover on add, then go to listener, and then we have just select the required listener. Okay, so you can actually add listener on the level of thread group or even on the level of samplers also. But in that case, the listener will have a scope of the thread group or sampler which you have actually used for adding those listeners. So we will see these examples again in the latter part of the tutorial so that it will be more easier for you to understand.